Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Thursday. We're going to give it a few moments before we get started. We want to give everybody just a few minutes before we do get started so that everybody can get nice and comfortable. As always, make sure your popcorn's popped. I recommend always tossing a little extra butter on there, a little salt, top off the coffee if you need that. Hopefully, this one won't be too boring. I'm pretty excited about it. And then we'll get started here in just a few moments. Ooh, I'm glad Thanksgiving's over with. I was like starting to get tired. I'm like back into it.
Yeah, I got all the rest I needed for Thanksgiving. I'm ready to go. Do a few more weeks before we move into the Christmas season.
Right? We got holiday parties coming up. It'll be a lot of fun. For those of you who have just joined, we're going to give it just another minute or so before we get started. Thanks a lot for your patience. We're going to let everybody get settled.
It kind of been what you're talking about in regards to having fun with compliance. It can come off as a little bit boring, but it's kind of like baseball. If you really like baseball, baseball is pretty exciting and cool. If you don't, I'm sure it's quite boring.
I mean, I'm sure we can do a seventh inning stretch here of some variety.
We
Oh,
don't,
the
we
song.
yeah, we don't stop serving drinks at 7:30 though.
Didn't they change that now? They or at least at Coors Field. Did they? I thought they started serving past the seventh inning.
I'm not sure. There's a few places I know they definitely cut it off where fans are just extra rowdy by that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm from Boston. They definitely cut it off at seventh.
yeah. Well, hopefully we can grab a game together sometime soon and we won't cut it off. But anyways, I appreciate everybody joining us today. My name is Ben Balsog. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for AdCellerant. I'm joined today by a couple of my esteemed colleagues. I'll introduce them in just a few moments. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, there's a big puzzle going on these days. It's tied around data privacy and compliance. And as much as we hate to see it, as much as we hate to even think about how much work will actually go into all this stuff, we need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to protect ourselves, our partners, our customers, our advertisers. And so my colleagues today are here to help kind of explain, what data privacy and compliance is and what we can do to make sure that we're all being safe and protecting each other appropriately. As a quick reminder, we are recording this. We are going to send the recording and the deck to everybody afterwards. And if you have any questions, I highly encourage you guys to use the chat, or excuse me, the Q&A feature that is enabled. We will answer questions on the fly, and then we'll also save a little bit of time at the end for everybody. So please feel free to use that as we continue. First on our agenda for today, I will introduce our friends here, our celebrity guests is what I like to call. We'll talk a little bit more about data privacy and compliance, what it is, the higher level overview and the evolution of it. Why is it important? What we should look out for and consider, and how it can help set you apart from your customers. We'll finish it off with some key takeaways and some potential next steps of what you guys could do today, tomorrow, next week, just to make sure that you're doing the little bit necessary to ensure you're protecting yourselves. As always, I am Ben Balslag. I'm the familiar face around here, but I do want to introduce a couple of my friends here. I've got Douglas Lejeune from our team, our compliance director, compliance manager, director. I'll give him the director role, hell yeah. And Jonathan Hemnitz, our VP of engineering. Would you guys mind introducing yourselves? Jonathan, I'd like to start with you and then hand it off to Douglas from there and just talk a little bit about how did we start focusing in on compliance and how do we come to Douglas?
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to start things off. So, just before I dive in on that, I'll introduce myself a little bit. So I'm Jonathan Hemness. I'm one of the VPs of engineering over here at AdCellerant. I've been at AdCellerant now for about 4 years now. And my role oversees some bits of UI marketing that I'm sure y'all are familiar with, and then also security and compliance. And to your question, Ben, security and compliance is something that we've been thinking about for a long time here at AdCellerant. right? Obviously we are a vendor for everyone that we work with, and we want to be excellent stewards of their data, right? I believe it's our role in this job to make sure that when people give us data, we're keeping it secure, we're storing it in a compliant manner, we're treating it with the proper respect that it deserves. And so we actually, we hired several years ago a senior security engineer who has been working with us in both the security and on the compliance side for a while now. Really helped us take our game from what I think we were doing a pretty solid job up to what I would consider to be pretty high class with respect to where we're at in the industry. And we realized, there's further work to be done and some further things that we're doing that we can prove that we're doing. And so we brought on Douglas a little while ago, and he joined us and is helping us directly in the compliance role, making sure that we're achieving high marks on all the various different compliance benchmarks and keeping us accountable to our vision and goal with respect to security and compliance. And so with that, I'll pass it over to a man who's significantly more brilliant than myself, Douglas.
Douglas, tell us about yourself.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. And yeah, Ben, thanks for the promotion. I appreciate that. Just so everybody knows, the beard I have is a COVID beard. You can see my picture there. I don't have one. It's not some sort of Zoom mask or something. So just to introduce myself, I've worked in compliance for quite a long time. I guess about 18 years now at various companies, healthcare companies, Amazon, Oracle. I worked on, risk and HIPAA actually at Amazon on Alexa. And even in the 90s, I was leading processing medical claims, which got involved with HIPAA. HIPAA hit about 95, 96, and so on and so forth. But overall, I've built compliance programs, data privacy programs from scratch in big organizations, say of several thousand employees, to startups that might under 100, in a way that is practical, makes sense, scalable, and so on and so forth. So something that can fits well for the smaller organizations, gets them up to speed quickly and compliant, as well as the larger organizations. It gets everybody where not only are we compliant, all the organizations I work for, they get certified for ISO 27001, PCI DSS, which is for credit cards, HIPAA compliant / high trust certification, and everything else in between. So I have a lot of experience with all of these different areas, and be it complex or simple solutions. I'm here to answer any questions that you have, and looking forward to what you have for us.
Wow, I didn't actually realize you did some of those things. That's pretty wild. Very impressive. And I'll tell you what, I think it goes to show when it comes to AdCellerant, a lot of the employees that we have, not just in compliance and security and in engineering and sales and operations, we're pretty particular about the people that are joining the team to make sure that they each and every single individual is really helping the company just continue to level up. So oh my gosh, Douglas, that is very impressive. I was talking to Douglas a few weeks ago. We met in person for the first time, and I mean, Douglas, you even talked to people, the CIA, the FBI. You've had some pretty wild conversations in the past, and the fact that you can sit there and not keep a straight poker face, and know that you're not talking telling any white lies, or really you're just going straight up with them, is really, really impressive. So as we kind of start into this, I'd love to hear from you, Douglas, Douglas, give us your high level overview of just what data privacy and compliance really is. What's your evolution understanding of it, and how did we get to where we are today?
Yeah, it's easy to nerd out on some of this stuff, but all of this evolves. Kind of what I quickly mentioned earlier, that HIPAA hit in 95. Nobody even paid attention to it until 2004. Once things got a little bit more technical. In 95, it was more along paper claims processing, your doctor's office having the screen that when you go in there and sign in, turn the right way. Or even if you log in, when you walk in, you used to have a kind of a a login that you would write down your name, making sure that list of names wasn't seen by the next person coming in. Pretty simple, but it wasn't in place prior to that and not required. And even talking about stuff, and I was mentioning this to Ben the other day in regards to like this goes way back, like Upton Sinclair when he wrote The Jungle about the meat processing back in the early 1900s, and it shocked everybody, and that turned into some regulations. Obviously the regulations have evolved since then in regards to the food industry overall, and we're all thankful for it. Now it's the same thing with HIPAA and data privacy laws. These have evolved. So you start with HIPAA, and then it was probably, I don't know, maybe late 90s, early 2000s is when like AB 1386 came out in California. So that was just data privacy, which they were saying encrypt your data, wherever that might be. It wasn't so much about transmissions at that point, but that fed into what you see now, the California law CCPA, which has all these caveats for protecting data, letting people have the right to opt in, opt out, and so on and so forth. And also all of that evolved into GDPR, which I'm sure you've heard about it's the EU data privacy law, which has like 99 articles and covers everything from data protection, just how you communicate, how you evaluate what data you have in house and so on. All of that came into play. I think it was around 2018, and that evolution is still going on. Now we have AI going to be hitting the market. What is AI going to do with data privacy? Kind of don't know. What regulations are going to be out there? Kind of don't know. So you need to get positioned or just continue the evolving of your compliance and data privacy program so that you're well aligned now. Because when AI starts doing its thing, you don't want to be behind the curve and having to play catch up from way back. You want to just be like, okay, we're pretty close. Let's make these tweaks and we're compliant is now. So it's an evolving process. And overall, it's about protecting people's data. Obviously, that's what HIPAA did. But now it's evolved into making sure that people have rights with their data. That data is their data. And that results in issues and fines and so on and so forth that we'll talk about later.
So it sounds like, it started off as just protect the data that you have, right? Just don't let other people be able to access it. It then evolves into protect the data that's moving within your own organization, make sure that that's not being transmitted in wrong places. But because of the way that technology has evolved, you have your Googles, you have email, you have phone transmissions, and just what everything is now evolving to because of the technology evolution. It's about how do we protect the data as it goes from, say, one organization to the other, or from one system to another system. And then also knowing now that the data really, it continues to belong to the individual, right? I mean, although a company may have access to it so that they can connect with an individual, it still belongs to that specific individual. And I think of like, the HIPAA compliance, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's so much more compliance out there and data privacy that's necessary. So when we think about how it actually is accessed today, how did we get from, hey, we're not just protecting the data, we're not just protecting the channels that we're going through and the way that it's transmitted? I mean, how does this happen? I mean, tell us, like, how do the hackers even do this these days? You hear about hacking, it's like, what is even happening here?
Yeah, one thing, just to mention how HIPAA also evolved. HIPAA, again, it was just mainly paper and kind of that manual stuff. And then in the early 2000s, maybe it was 2010 or so, but they came out with HITRUST, which is the technical version of HIPAA. And so even they recognize, like, okay, this is beyond just what's on your desktop and so on and so forth. So how they get in, and this is the Internet of Things. And as you can see on the slide there, it says Bluetooth speaker and so on and so forth. And a good one to talk about is the washer or the refrigerator that's connected to the internet. There's lots of parts that are involved in providing those services, getting your washer to connect to the internet so you have an app that you can turn it on or off or whatever. Not all those parts are vetted necessarily. It depends on the manufacturer and so on and so forth. But the manufacturer of, let's just say, the washer doesn't manufacture all the 47,000 parts that go in there. And you'll find that with Bluetooth speakers, those light bulbs that you can change the color on remotely, and so on and so forth, anything that connects to a Wi-Fi or what have you. What happens is that there'll be vulnerabilities built purposefully within those, and they'll sell those vulnerabilities on a chip or whatever that makes the washer run or the light bulb light super cheap. So then the vendor is going to say, okay, well, we'll go ahead and buy those because we can get 1,000 of those for 10 cents. Well, that vulnerability is in there. And so then what happens as you connect to the internet, those things will ping, and then the vulnerability is exposed. And then they may then land on your, let's just say it's your home Wi-Fi, plant something there, and then that will connect to everything you do. And if they're connecting to, say, person XYZ may not have anything too interesting, they're not going to sweat it. You can get into this, get into that. They're looking for the big fish. They're looking for, people that are, CTOs at their company. They're looking for somebody who has access to bigger things,
Okay.
principal engineers and so on, so they can hack them and then get into the other businesses.
So the way that this came up was because, this has been a big learning process for me. I'm the sales guy. You guys all know that one. The way this came up is because as we kind of, pierce the seal on this conversation about data privacy and compliance and how we're sharing all this information with you guys, I was, learning about all these things with Douglas. I'm like, well, Douglas, me and my wife, we just bought a new washer and dryer last year. It's a great little Samsung. I got a Samsung refrigerator now. I got Samsung TVs. And one of the craziest things, I was like, I have an app on my phone that I downloaded, and I can literally wash my dishes. I can literally start the washer, start the dryer, and do all those things. And I was like, so you're telling me they can come in here and not just ruin my, change the colds to a hot wash and then I ruin all my clothes, but they're using that to say, get into my home Wi-Fi, get into my phone and find a vulnerability. And then eventually they could potentially drain my bank accounts. They're not going to find much in there, but they could literally, ruin me, kind of thing, right? And so this is what we have to think about. And it's not just about what we're doing in our own personal lives. Our businesses, our livelihoods now, our media companies, our agencies, our platforms that we offer here. There's vulnerabilities everywhere. And so we just need to make sure that what we're doing is providing these potential hackers or whoever it might be, the people who are out there, they're doing this stuff already. We just need to make sure that we just cover our bases as much as possible, because it's not a matter of, I think, Douglas, you said this before, it's not a matter of if. They're all trying to do it. It's like we just got to make sure that we provide as many blockades as possible to protect ourselves. And so this is, I think, the core and the meat of our conversation here today that we really want to help kind of educate all of you guys on. And Jonathan, I know you're going to say something here as well. I think it's tied to, like, why is this such a big deal, right?
Yeah, and to kind of put a little bit of a bow on this section of the conversation, right? Back in the day, like when I was younger, if someone gave me data, it was my data, right? Like as a person in engineering, right? You give me the data, it's my data. If I lose it, it's no big deal. It's my loss. However, the law and viewpoints of data have shifted dramatically since then. Now we view data like money, right? We view it as like, I go to the bank and I give them my money. I better get my money. I don't care if they got robbed. If they got robbed, that's on them, right? That's my money. I'm getting my money back. And that is very much the way that data is viewed now, is that when someone gives you their data, it continues to be their data. And that data, much like money, has a lot of value associated with it. And places that store more data and interact more data are bigger targets for bad actors in that sphere. And much to the, Douglas's point here, they will try many different avenues in order to get to that data and do things like try to stop your business from running, try to hijack and blackmail you for information. And then, as we'll move on here, not only do you need to remedy that situation in those instances, but you also have reporting and legal obligations thereafter. And that's, one of the reasons that we take it so seriously here at AdCellerant.
That's important to talk about here. And I think, it kind of leads me into like this bullet point we have on vendor management. I've got personal connections with people and understand a lot of the other kind of vendors and players in the space today, where just earlier last year, there was a hacker that actually got into their system, and this company actually supports the day-to-day operations of thousands and thousands of different media companies. If you think about that, they just halted literally the day-to-day operations of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions and billions of dollars worth of media being transmitted for all these advertisers, for these media companies. And they're halting just those right now. They're holding it hostage. They're blackmailing this company saying, pay up and we'll release all this stuff. But they obviously found a channel to create this kind of havoc, but it has such a huge impact. And so that's why this conversation is so important. You have to make sure that it's not just you guys protecting your data. Your vendors are protecting your data. They're staying compliant. They're making sure that they're putting up those blockades to ensure that this doesn't affect you as a business, let alone hundreds and thousands of media outlets as a business too.
One thing to play off what you said, Ben, is that if I was going to hack into a company, big company XYZ, I wouldn't go after them because they probably have $1 million solution. They probably have 20 people like me doing whatever, and they have all these alerts in place. What I would do, I would look at their vendor list and I would say what vendors they most acquired, what vendors likely don't have a robust compliance program or data privacy program. I would go and try to get into them, because once I get into them, now I'm in their vendor network of the big company, and then I'll work my way through the food chain, because somebody in that initial vendor that I accessed is going to have the rights I want. And then I'm going to go from there, not the big company.
So I'm glad you said that, because and Jonathan, to your point as well, we think about the data that we have, and we have this, first party data is obviously king, right? We have this future that's imminent, that's coming down, and we're all going to be focused on, all right, now we have to use our own data or other types of data, because we can't use all the other data out there because Google doesn't want us to, right? And unfortunately, and we have all the different hearings going on with Google right now, so it's going to be interesting to see how all this stuff plays out. I hope we can put on a webinar based on that stuff, because that would be really interesting too. But because people are storing all their own data more now than ever before, it's so much more important to do these things. And I'm going to kind of take it back to the HIPAA piece as well, because I think about the data, and if we think of just like what one record looks like, let's say it's this record is Jonathan Hemnes. This is his home address. This is how much money he makes. This is actually his email. This is his phone number, and these are actually his health pieces, tied to like his HIPAA information, right? Like that's information that's technically Jonathan's information, and only his information that he should be sharing with his doctor, with his medical professional, right? Did you know that one leaked record of HIPAA data could cost upwards of $5,000? If you think about that, I think of the health institution that me and my family attend. They've got tens of thousands of patients. $5,000 per leaked record could literally put that health institution in bankruptcy. It could absolutely ruin that. And if you think about this, as well as we're even just thinking about a lot of our clients and advertisers, a lot of you have health institutions and health-related companies that you're working with today. One leaked record could potentially cost you, that business, even in AdCellerant or another partner of yours, if you don't have it protected appropriately, upwards of $5,000 per leaked record. So,
well, one thing I'd like to mention on that too is that you said the 5,000 record, and maybe we'll get into it on the next slide, was just the fact that if you do get that fine, not only is expensive, but you're also going to be put on probation by HIPAA, and they're going to manage everything that you do for the next year or two, which is going to slow down your business a great deal, because they want to make sure that basically it won't happen again.
So that's just one consequence. That is the tip of the iceberg. Just that one leaked record is the very tip of the iceberg. Douglas, you started going through some of these other consequences with me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is making me a little bit nervous. But I'll tell you what, I feel a whole lot better with Douglas on our side, knowing that he's here to protect all. I mean, literally going through every single vendor platform that AdCellerant might be using and making sure that we're not only compliant, but we're helping our partners be completely compliant, and then also helping all of their advertisers be totally compliant as well. So these are things that you need to have in place. Douglas, this is the scary part. Let's instill the fear in people here. And beyond being costly, what other things happen here?
Well, one thing is of course the costly fine, but one thing to go back to HIPAA is that they audit all levels of organizations. They just don't go after the big players. They have their audit team will go after small, medium, and large organizations just randomly. They're focused mainly on the large, but nobody's out of scope, I guess I should say, as far as getting audited by HIPAA and held to those standards and so on and so forth. Yeah, the New York State one is a bit crazy in the sense that if you do have a data breach and it reaches some limit, I can't remember, it's pretty small, like 100 individuals, then you have to expose what you did on 5 different media outlets within the state. And with HIPAA, you get added to the HIPAA wall of shame for life. And literally there's items on there going a couple decades back now that says company XYZ lost so many records because they sent an email to the wrong place, or that somebody accessed it and they couldn't prove that the person who accessed it didn't use that data maliciously. So they had to report it and so on and so forth. And one thing, even though we're not talking about credit cards, if any of you do take credit cards or manage credit cards or data and so on, there's a lot of rules with that. And I've been involved with setting up credit card PCI DSS certifications at a bunch of different companies. But the thing with that is if you don't comply with that, similar with HIPAA, you can't take credit cards for your business for 6 months or a year. And it might be MasterCard only you can't take, or it might be all of them. But there's a lot of ramifications just on what we're talking about. You get into the individual state laws, and they even have more ramifications, fines, governance, and all these other things that are going to just make your life a bit miserable if you do it right the first time from the onset, you're going to be a lot better off than if you did nothing.
I tell you what, I know we all like cash a whole lot, but I could guarantee you everybody on this phone call has probably jotted down a credit card number, a debit card number, a checking account number, anything like that to collect payment from the businesses that they're doing business with, right? So there needs to be a process tied to that as well. There needs to be, if you have a rep that's like, oh, I'll take your credit card number down, don't worry, I'll send it to finance, we'll charge you this way. You need to be very, very, very careful about that one. That one could be a not just a HIPAA bite, but that one could be a pretty serious bite for you guys and cause you to, literally cost you dearly on being able to just collect fees and dues from the people that you're doing business with. So little things like that is just like so important, you guys. I'm not just talking about data you're collecting through campaigns. We're not just talking about HIPAA data. I mean, this is day-to-day activities and processes that you have in place with people like a sales rep, like an operations person, like an accounting individual. There needs to be a very particular process in place, because the one time that it's done the wrong way and that somebody catches you on it, it could cost dearly. So as much as I hate instilling the fear in everybody, there's things that you can do to make sure that you keep your eyes out for it. And so we have some red flags that you guys can kind of look out for here, but also how can you start to identify these red flags? And Jonathan, I think you guys did a good job of starting to identify some of these things before you pulled Douglas in. Jonathan, tell us, how do we get to just hiring Douglas in the first place? What were we doing internally?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ben. Thank you for that. So, the things that we're thinking about a lot here at AdCellerant, right, is what is the data, where is the data, and how does it move through our organization, right? Obviously, we get lists of data from our partners, and we oftentimes send them back lists of data, et cetera, right? And understanding how that moves through our organization granularly allows us to analyze, okay, what are our risks, right? To your point, how do I identify a red flag, right? I need to know where I could lose this data. in order for it to have a little red flag on it, that where we say, hey, we got to go in there and look at that. You know, as we've done that internally, right, we've uncovered a lot of things where it's like, you know what, I think this is working well, but we're going to put in some more security measures in place over here, or we're going to modify how long we keep this data for, so that we're not exposing ourselves needlessly to any risk, right? And so, you know, we at a certain point, you know, in an organization, you know, when we were smaller, right, obviously we could leverage some of our partners to help out with that in the security space. You know, we could also, you know, interact with our counsel as well, and they could offer guidance on what the appropriate way to handle this data is. But, you know, we're, you know, AdCellerant's, you know, large enough now to where we actually, you know, want to have a dedicated resource associated to this. And so that's where Douglas came in, was that we wanted to make sure that, you know, as we grow as a business, that we are being super valuable to our partners, and you know, treating, as I mentioned before, treating their data with the respect that it deserves, and being good stewards of that data.
Let me preface this before I, talk to Douglas. I know, Douglas, we're talking about some things that we've done internally, but we're definitely not attorneys. We're definitely not general counsel. We're not sitting here telling you guys this is exactly what you should do to be compliant. But these are things that you may want to consider and start exploring more with your own attorneys. So as you guys continue to evolve your businesses, they're growing and there's more processes put in place, more people put in place, and essentially more vulnerabilities everywhere. These are things you could probably consider. Douglas, tell us a little bit about how to uncover some of these red flags and how you do it.
I think one thing to also put in there, and this is part of the data flow, understanding it, is understanding that PII, personal identifiable information, which is data privacy laws around that, is not always super clear. It's stackable. And stackable, basically, what I mean by that is if you have my name, not a big deal. I mean, you see it on the screen right now. Not going to change anything. But if you have my address, all of a sudden that stacks on top. It's starting to become PII. Then my phone number and a whole bunch of other things. And so you have to consider that maybe some organizations will think, we don't even have any personal identifiable information. You may have it stackable. You may have it turns into PII. So I think that's a key thing to look at. One thing that I would do, or one of the first things I do in addition to what Jonathan talked about, is understanding your internal processes, but get a data flow, get the right people in the room, and just say, okay, where is our data from start to finish? And how do we protect that? Is it on people's laptops? Are they sharing it out of their drives? Are they emailing it? Where is it? And okay, you'll be surprised at how much data is really out there that you don't really have 100% control of as a business. And then also I would adopt a framework. We have a couple here that we've adopted: ISO 27001, NIST, and we're going towards SOC 2 controls. But ISO 27001 is a great one, and go through the list of requirements in there. One of them is identifying your sources of data, your data flow, and so on and so forth. But it will force you to have things in place, like you see third bullet there, user access management. It will require you to say, hey, how does somebody get access to sensitive data? Well, they should have a business need. They need a business justification to do that. What is your encryption of the data that people have? Oh, we don't have encryption. All of a sudden you need to have encryption. And I think that there's another key one too is, and this leads, and these how these things cascade is data retention. If you have a data retention policy, how long do we keep emails? How long do we keep this PII that we need to keep for some business purpose? And all these other things, your data retention, you may say we keep it for 6 months or 5 years or whatever it may be. You start to think about, okay, how do we delete that data? And how do we manage that data until we delete it? And then that ties into different parts of ISO 27001. So like I said, it all cascades. You get a framework, you kind of go through it. Some of it will be above, maybe if you're a small organization, what you can do right now, but at least you can start writing policies towards that and understand, the good and bad about it and where you have some weak points.
So it's not just like an IT manager that can take care of your user management. It's not just, somebody who makes sure the internet's working and that we don't have any, we're using the VPN. You're telling me there's a lot more to this?
Yeah. A lot more, like you said earlier, is that, it's not a matter of if we're getting attacked, we are getting attacked. And if you don't have insight into those attacks as a business or as an individual, obviously you have malware on your laptop, your Gmail is probably stopping a lot of spam. If you don't have insight in those attacks, you need to start getting that insight. That should be a red flag. The lack of noise should be concerning.
For the record, we do not have any active attacks going on. We're not anticipating anything. But I'll tell you what, if anybody's coming after AdCellerant and our partners and any of the infrastructure that we have in place, I'll tell you what, they're gonna have a hard time trying to make anything happen here. This is really, really good information, Douglas. And we want to give a couple of takeaways here, maybe some suggested next steps for those of you who may have one person in your organization, two people in your organization, 200 or 2,000. It's important to make sure you understand what any suggested next steps might be in terms of, we're going to learn a little bit more about how compliant we're being, how protected we are, how we're protected our data is, and how we're transmitting those types of things. I'd love to hear from you, Douglas, just a couple of key takeaways that we can, make short and sweet for these guys that, help them understand what can we do next.
Yeah, the first thing, we'll go through the bullet points. Understand the data flow from beginning to end. And again, this is from the day that data gets into your organization anyway. It may come through 20 different channels. How does it get there? And is it in a secure manner that it gets there? Then who has access to it? Where does it flow or not flow? Is there opportunities for somebody in your organization to grab data they don't need access to, and so on, all the way until the data is finally removed. And the people that need to be in that room to understand that are, leaders in your organization, but more importantly, probably are your SMEs who see the issues every day. And ideally, you have somebody who is a security or data privacy evangelist in your organization who will just say, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. You need to listen to them and start up I guess a committee, or at least a small team that actually takes it seriously and meets every month and starts thinking through these things. And it's one of those deals that as you start thinking through it, you're going to find a lot of gaps that you need to remediate. And that's fine. It means that you're getting it before somebody else sees it. So you can start fixing those things. So that's probably the easiest thing. Just do that. You can do that starting Monday, take you an hour, and then some follow-ups, and you have a pretty good outline of where your data flow is. And you start to identify your issues that you need to address. Number two, understand the compliance laws and regulations. Some of this can be a bit overwhelming. So ideally, you could cover every state. You may not be isolated to state XYZ. You may be everywhere or even global. A key, I guess, law and regulation to go after would be CCPA in California. That's a good benchmark to use. And GDPR is also very solid. And the reason GDPR is really good is because it feeds all the state data privacy laws. Because if, I don't know the Illinois laws exactly, but for example, Illinois will re-provision some of the elements of GDPR and use them as far as giving people the right to change their data if you have it, giving them the right to remove the data if you have it, and so on and so forth, giving people data privacy rights. So understand how it applies to you, but if that's too much, go after GDPR as sort of a baseline and then kind of feed off of that to create your policies and so on and so forth. And I think a key one here, and this goes back to the washer thing, the item number 3, is that make sure that your supply chain is handling data privacy, compliance, security, and availability effectively. You want to make sure that everybody in your supply chain, all your vendors, meet the same standards that you need to meet. You don't want to have somebody in your supply chain failing, and then it makes you vulnerable. Or if they get hacked, all of a sudden it's like, oh, your company is mentioned in the hack as one of their partners. That's not a good thing either. Everybody loses in that situation. And as you hold their feet to the fire a little bit, they improve. So it's making them better off. Everybody improves in this. We don't allow any vendors to work with us, no matter what the services are, unless they meet certain standards for security, confidentiality. They meet regulations. The key ones are available when we need them to meet, maybe like the 5 nines and things like that. So we hold our vendors to a strict standard, not just, hey, they got great pricing. That's awesome too, But the thing is that pricing seems not that big a deal if they get hacked and attacked. So I think those are the key these three things. If you do those, this is a great roadmap to start from, and then you can evolve. And it's not a one-time thing. You have to kind of continuously, keep this thing going. It's a continuous process.
And I think, you told me before, this isn't something that should cost you guys tens of thousands of dollars. You can, maybe hire a quick one-off like compliance audit that could cost as little as maybe $1,000 for a day's worth of work by a compliance auditor for themselves. And then even, just lean into your general counsel, ask them to see if they have any suggestions on where they can, help you guys start discussing or auditing some of the compliance measures that you have in place. And then lastly, I think I have to really embellish the fact and tell you guys how impressed I am. The fact that, AdCellerant has done their due diligence to ensure every single vendor and platform we use, whether it's with billing, whether it's with contract agreements and processes around those, whether it's how we're collecting data and sharing data within through our partners and each other. Like, it's all compliant. There's been training that's been put in place, and it's been put into a process that ensures that there's no leaks on any side of the bridge there. So I cannot thank you guys enough. Douglas, no wonder we hired you, man. Oh my gosh. I keep learning more and more every single conversation. I can't wait till we have a couple of bourbons and we get into the details at the holiday party in a few weeks. Thank you both, Jonathan and Douglas, for joining me today. I thought that was awesome. Make sure you all are signing up for our next webinar. It's on Thursday, the 14th, talking a little bit about your media partnerships and success strategies that you can take heading into 2024. We're going to be talking a lot about the needs, wants, and wishes of why people, choose to work with an AdCellerant or somebody like an AdCellerant, and how you guys can set yourselves apart. We're going to have the full biz dev team there. All of my colleagues, I'm excited to have them. But thank you again. We hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. You're enjoying the holiday season, and you're staying compliant. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.